Tony D and Little Joan, and this is a screenwriter's take on Superman 2025 by James Gunn. Smash like and subscribe. Thank you for smash liking and subscribing. Thanks for checking out my books, The Pineys, books 1 through 17. Available at Amazon.com. Don't forget, Kindle Unlimited is free. Don't forget the t-shirt store, and don't forget book 18 dropping this month. All right, Superman. Let's get into it. So, as always, I'll give my non-spoiler review, and then we'll get into the spoilers and break it down. So, overall, I understand the criticisms. I don't quite understand the over-criticisms of this movie. There's a lot here to like, enough that even my girlfriend, who suddenly decided to see this movie with me at a drive-in, nonetheless, we saw it at a drive-in, the last drive-in in New Jersey, actually said, yeah, that wasn't too bad. So, it's not too bad. I don't know what, people are really losing their S over certain aspects of the movie. It does suffer from having too many characters. It does suffer from some woke nonsense that is more in the subtext than it is in the front of the movie. But that being said, it's not bad. It's just a little overpacked. You really could have eliminated, ballpark, I say you probably could have eliminated half a dozen characters easy in this movie, and it would have played exactly the same. Probably would have given you more time to flesh out some of the characters. I mean, they throw in every Superman side character you've ever heard of, and they just don't need to be there. They just really don't. It could have just been Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, and Perry White, and that's it. The rest of the guys, I don't even, they've got a few throwaway lines. They're fun and funny, but by putting those characters in, it sort of just takes away from the focus on the main characters. But Crypto is a great addition. I loved Crypto because I have a crazy little white dog of my own who doesn't listen. She doesn't listen. No, she doesn't. She would be much worse than Crypto, I'm sure. Right, Joan? You'd be running around biting people. Oh, yeah. And people go, aw, so cute. So cute. But overall, it's kind of a confusing movie. A little bit. Because there's a lot of reveals that they just come right at you if you're not paying attention. I mean, the wind up into the movie is a lot to take in. The upside is they don't go over the origin story, which is good. But they do quickly brush over, like, okay, this is when Superman fell to Earth. This is, where he is now. This is what happened, just recently. And I saw Doomcock's review of this, and he came down hard on the Lex Luthor character. I gotta tell you, I don't see the problem with it. Not really. He had a solid enough plan. He really hated this version of Lex Luthor. I thought he was fine. I thought he was more akin to the Silver Age version of Lex Luthor, who was just kind of obsessed with killing Superman. He just hated him. And I was fine with that. You could get into more of why. But some of the portrayals are very cartoonish. And there's some very subtle messaging in this that I can only get into breaking down the nitty-gritty details, which I did find a little like, I don't like that. Found it a little insulting. But overall, it's an entertaining movie. I would never watch it again. I mean, I'm not a guy who watches movies multiple times, but yeah, there's no reason to see this movie a second time. Because it just kind of goes from one thing to the next. And that criticism I do agree with. It just kind of goes from one thing and the next. It's more like the comic book in that way. You know, some people are comparing it for television. That's kind of the way comic books are. You know, there's so much going on. It just jumps from one event to the next because that's the way comic books are. You get to the end of it, or at least they used to be. I mean, now, let's not talk about it, but back in the day, they'd end on a cliffhanger, go right into the next story. So, you've got a bunch of stuff going on, which, you know, barely. I mean, you got to pay attention in this movie, or you'll get lost. You'll get lost real fast. If you went to the bathroom in the middle of this movie, you could easily come back and go, "What the hell is going on now?" I kind of agree with Doomcock about the Justice Gang kind of outshining Superman a little bit. I mean, Mr. Terrific is a pretty good character. They give him a lot to do. And he's sort of the black guy superhero in a lot of ways, which was fine. I liked his character. He was fun. But you know, they didn't really explain him, but that was fine. That was fine enough. I mean, it was sort of like the B grade characters being thrown in, and but you know, as I said, James Gunn is a fairly good scriptwriter. Now, this really tested his abilities. Again, he's juggling multiple characters. There's very little character development except for Superman and Lois, but he crams it all in there. He tries to cram it all in there. I mean, there's not a lot. You know, it's sort of equal to their screen time, really. You know, Lex is more obsessed with his plans. He doesn't really get developed per se, but he does have cool plans. I'll give him that. You know, it's kind of weird. It's kind of a weird movie. You know, the act breakdown. It really is an act. It's really got several different acts. I would say at minimum this movie has about 9 acts, 9 little acts, and then it kind of all comes together in Act 9. Kind of, not really. So, would I recommend this movie? For people who aren't that into superheroes who want a nice summer movie, it's fine. This would be a perfect movie to see. As I've said many times, like down in South Jersey, we go to the shore, maybe get a house for the week, and one of those days you're going to get rained out, or you just feel like doing something different. So rather than going on the boardwalk, you say, "Oh, let's go see a movie." This would be the perfect summer movie to see, because it's just mind-numbing. It's not important. That much is true. It's a very unimportant movie. Yes, it's reestablishing the DC universe, but if it went, you know, if it went completely off the rails or completely in a different direction after this, that would be fine too, because nothing that happens in this movie, like a lot of empty comics, doesn't really matter. It's just the characters, just the action figures being danced around again on a table and going pew 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 pew. But James Gunn does it in a fairly entertaining way, so I don't mind it. I don't mind it at all. So yeah, it's okay. It's okay. I don't know what you're complaining about. I'm not exactly sure what you expected. You're not going to see much better than this. This is a work for hire gig that James Gunn took, and this is about the best he can do. And unless you get somebody who's, I don't know, the great grandson of Siegel and or Schuster, and he happens to be the greatest screenwriter and film director imaginable, I don't know how you're going to get something better. You know, the Richard Donner's films are what they are. They're great. But one thing Hollywood doesn't like to do is repeat itself. So you'll note that other than Superman, all the characters in this movie and, the supporting cast, the main guys, they tried to jam in as many other characters that you've really never seen much of before to kind of spruce it up. So it wouldn't, I don't know, run over the toes of the Justice League or any of the DC movies that went before, because they're trying to get you to forget all those. And they're eventually going to reestablish some. So like Maxwell Lord is going to be reestablished, and he's only in the movie for a second, but that's like one of the characters, right? He was in Wonder Woman 1984, and now they're going to reestablish him here. But that movie's so forgettable and nobody liked it. They don't really have to worry about Pedro Pascal's Max Lord / Donald Trump metaphor in the new DCU. So, does it lay a good foundation? It lays a foundation. If you drill down into it and you're consistent with it, Hollywood is rarely very consistent. I think James Gunn will be mostly consistent with his own creation. I don't know if he gets other guys involved that they're going to be very consistent. Quite frankly, it's probably already gone off the rails to some degree. I don't know about Supergirl, but she makes a quick cameo. They kind of throw her in. Yeah. So for a summer popcorn movie, this is perfectly functional. I don't know what. A lot of people are getting up in arms. Oh my God, the portrayal of Superman. I'm not exactly sure what you expected from Hollywood. But if you were expecting, something that like James Gunn, I mean, he's a pretty good screenwriter, decent filmmaker. He was not going to beat Richard Donner's portrayal. It just wasn't going to happen. He's not that good. He's, he can make a fun IP. He could take the IPs and make them fun. That's exactly what we wanted. He does that. But if you were expecting a great piece of movie making that transcends Superman and Richard Donner, yeah, that just wasn't happening. Just wasn't happening. It just wasn't happening. It's not the way these IPs run now. They don't give it to a filmmaker and let them run with it. You can tell, in my view, you can tell that this movie's been monkeyed with 7 different ways from Sunday. They've jammed so much in here. I mean, my analysis, strap in. All right, let's get into the details here. So this is going to be spoilers ahoy from this point on. If you'd like to go see this movie, it's in theaters now. It'll be on Max, I assume, in another month or two for $20 or whatever. And again, it's, if you like Superman, it's okay. It's fine. Is it great? There's some cool moments. I really like Crypto. James Gunn does his best to try to insert some new blood into this. I mean, the engineer, she's there. At least there's Superman doesn't have a deep bench. But she's there, and they explained her, and it was fine. Ultraman, perfectly fine. I know what they're setting that up for. And, and I thought Lex Luthor, Doomcock really hated Lex Luthor. I thought he was fine. And there's a couple other guys he adds, I guess. I don't remember them. I don't remember reading them. They're fine, for what they are. But again, it's just like completely overloaded. Okay. So let's get into the spoilers. So first of many acts, it starts off with this weird intro, 30 years ago, Superman lands on Earth or something like that. It was all done in threes, which wasn't, that's always a good number to use. It's lucky. Anyhow, it gives you this wind up in the beginning. It tells you where everything is. And then 3 minutes ago, Superman just got beat by the Hammer of Bavaria. And the hammer beat him so bad he had to fly back to the Fortress of Solitude so he could be healed by his robots who put him under the yellow sun, and then he heals up. Gives him intense yellow sun. So he goes all the way back to the Fortress of Solitude and gets all jazzed up by the robots there and introduce the robots and Crypto, who's a lot of fun. And then he goes back to Metropolis to fight. Well, he's been tracked by the engineer who just wanted to locate the Fortress of Solitude so later Lex Luthor could invade it and steal all of Superman's secrets. The problem with that plan is there was no guarantee that Superman would go back to the Fortress of Solitude to be healed. He heals underneath the yellow sun. And this has happened in the comics, and it could have happened in this movie by the logic of its own, that Superman could have just, I don't know, flew close to the sun, absorbed a lot of energy, gotten all his juice back and healed all his bones, and then gone back and beat the crap out of the Hammer of Bavaria. It kind of doesn't even make sense that the Hammer of Bavaria beat him. It doesn't really make sense, because then you find out the Hammer of Bavaria is really Ultraman in a costume. So it's fake. And then really Ultraman, again, spoilers, Ultraman is a clone of Superman, which will probably end up being Bizarro down the road. So that Lex has so much control over clone Superman, and he basically gives him all his moves, right? Like, so somehow he gets Ultraman to memorize every move, all these crazy moves, and then Lex feeds him the moves in a headset, and, you know, he just beats the hell out of Superman because he can beat him that way. Except, you know, Superman has super hearing. Like, I'm not sure why you wouldn't hear him hearing all that. I'm not sure why, you know, Superman wouldn't eventually kind of just start beating him. Or why Lex is particularly good at calling moves. Yeah, I get that he's smart, but Lex Luthor has never been known for his fighting prowess. So it was a little weird, but I could kind of accept it because it was like meant to be like, well, you know, brains beat brawn kind of thing. So he goes back. They figure out where the Fortress of Solitude is. The Hammer of Bavaria leaves, and this was all the result of Superman stopping a war between Bavaria and some other country whose name I can't pronounce. And the controversy is that Superman stopped the war, and because of that, now it's caused an international incident, and Lex Luthor is leveraging that because he wanted the Bavarians to overrun this other country, and he would get half the country. So that's the overall evil plan. But then later in the movie, Lex reveals that he only created that plan so he'd have an excuse to kill Superman. In the comics, there were a lot of origin stories for Lex Luthor. This one's a little more close to the Silver Age version in that he just hates Superman. Superman gets all the attention. He wants all the attention. It's not fair. You know, Lex wants all that good attention, and why should some random alien get it? And I thought that was fine. Rather than like there was a retrofitting of like, well, you know, Lex Luthor also lived in Smallville, and he had a full head of hair until Superman one day had to save him from a lab explosion and blew the fire out, but then the chemicals blew on Lex and made him bald, and from then on he resented Superman. Like, that was one of the, I don't know, that might have been is that the Golden Age version or the Silver? That might be the Silver Age. The one I'm thinking of is the Golden Age. I don't know. But it was all these different comic booky things. We don't want to go to that one. I don't think that one would work for a modern audience, but this was perfectly fine. He just hates Superman and wants to kill him. And he's like deep, deep, deep in the plan. But I will say, to Doomcock's point, he is a bit obsessive. It doesn't seem like anything else in Lex Corp's or Luthor Corp's wheelhouse has anything to do but to kill Superman. And the movie is so consumed with Luthor's plan to kill Superman, there's almost nothing else in the movie. So then, what happens? So the Hammer of Bavaria goes into this, what's later to be revealed, a pocket dimension, so he can instantaneously transport himself. And he shows up to, Luthor Corp, and it's revealed to be Ultraman, who nobody knows. In the movie public, the comic book guys were like, oh, Ultraman, isn't he like the evil Superman from an alternate universe? Well, like in this, he's a clone. So, later probably to become Bizarro. So then, Luthor's plan is to go to the Arctic and bust in on Superman's stuff and get some intel from him. In the meantime, he lets a little monster loose, which grows to an enormous size and then attacks the city, or his henchmen do. And then there's also a scene where, which they've shown clips of Lois interviewing Clark. They're already an item. And then, like, she complains that he keeps interviewing himself because he's Clark Kent, but he keeps interviewing Superman. So she decides to interview him and then, like, grills him so hard he gets mad. Which I had mixed feelings about that scene, only because the women in this movie are relentlessly competent. Like, every single one of them, except, I guess, the engineer, who eventually finally gets defeated. But, like, every woman in this movie is a strong, independent woman who doesn't scream, even though they're about to be brutally killed. It's very strange. Like, there are definitely woke undertones. I understand why people are calling it woke. It's not really woke, but what Dunn has done, he's taken all that woke stuff and he's put it into the subtext. So the subtext of this movie is most of the men end up in a scene crying, and most of the women end up, Lois is like the boss. Lois is the boss. Let me tell you, she does a lot of stuff in this movie, motivates everybody. The only character that kind of comes across as competent, who is male and doesn't cry, is Mr. Terrific. But that's another character I think people at Hollywood are like, oh yeah, let's push the women and let's push the new black superhero that we've created. Kind of, not really. So, we get it, Hollywood. Again, it's all subtext, but it's kind of like Superman does have sort of an emotional kind of payday at the end, though. So let me get to that. I mean, there's just so much going on. So Lex invades this Fortress of Solitude, and part of the deal is Superman has this message from his parents, Jor-El, and I forget the other one, but it's damaged. So he heard the first part of the message, and then Lex, for some reason, has the engineer decipher the second half of the message. Now, the first half is about, they love Clark or Kal-El, and, we're sending you to the planet and blah, blah, blah. And then the second half of the message that Clark never heard was, we want you to, take many wives and rule the stupid humans like they deserve to be ruled, basically. And, which, actually, a lot of people are complaining about that. That's not rewriting of history, by the way. That would totally jibe with the Kryptonians' sort of mindset. Because there was a great Elseworld story in the comics written by Christopher Priest, by the way, really good, one of the few good writers left in comics, where it was an Elseworlds thing where instead of just Superman surviving, Jor-El manages to transport himself and 100,000 Kryptonians, I think, to Earth, and they just take it over. It's pretty boss. It's a pretty boss story if you've never read it. But Kal-El still becomes Superman, and he basically fights for the freedom of the humans, and it's a really neat story. But in this, it's not so far-fetched that Jor-El would have that attitude. That's not the movie Jor-El, and not even the comic Jor-El if you really, really want to get technical, but that wouldn't be too far afield from how the Kryptonians think. They would have thought themselves a little high and mighty as compared to the lowly humans. So it's not totally out of whack. And I actually thought it was a nice little twist on the subject. They also had an interesting, fake language for the Kryptonians, and it was Bradley Cooper, and I forget the name of the woman. She's very familiar. You've seen her in a million things. And, yeah, I thought it was fine. Some people are like, what? They've changed the lore? That's not too big of a change, really. Not really. It's not really that big of a change when you get right down to it. And it's like basically saying that he's from an alien race, and this is how the aliens viewed him going to Earth. Like, that would have been acceptable to him, and not evil to the Kryptonians. It wouldn't have been evil. He would have ruled them, and his spawn would then rule after, and they would rule it nicely, benevolent sort of gods, if you will. But Superman, of course, was raised by Ma and Pa Kent, who are portrayed as total country bumpkins, like super country bumpkins. And so the big reveal at the end of the movie, of course, again, spoilers, is that in the beginning of the movie, he wants to hear the message from his biological parents, which then turns out, to be a little bit misunderstood by him, and that sort of messes him up. So the robots always play him the message from his biological parents, but then at the end of the movie, they say, okay, we're going to play the footage from your parents. That always is very soothing, as something like that is the line. And instead they play Ma and Pa Kent, like home movies with little Clark Kent. And it's sort of a reveal that Clark has gone on a little journey. But that's not the focus of the movie, because the Kents are barely in it. I kind of wish, if that had been the takeaway, that they had developed that a little more with the Kents. I'm not sure how he could have done it, considering all the stuff he jammed into this effing movie, but I think he needed to do it. And again, it was very Hollywood to make Ma and Pa Kent the two biggest bumpkins on the screen. I mean, they were bumpkins. And they made Pa Kent like a big crybaby. And as from Heels versus Babyface kept, his line was, "You will believe a man can cry." Yeah, that's kind of what it was like. It was a little too much crying from the male characters in this movie, and a little too much girl bossing. But again, I think Gunn keeps it mostly toned down. You notice it, but I don't know how badly it's going to bother you. Like, for some people it bothered, and I can understand why some people it just didn't. Like, for me, it didn't bother me because I don't care about this movie. I really don't. I mean, I loved the old Superman movie, mainly for Gene Hackman's portrayal of Lex Luthor. Australia. It was fun. I mean, it was surprising. And it was like the comics, and it was nice and simple. This, it jammed so much into it I can't find any piece of it all that important. You know, it felt like maybe there's, I don't know, 14 other scenes that they cut from this movie that they might add in later, or add in an extended version, or could have added in if they wanted to. Um, Thus, maybe there were extensive recuts after the initial focus group. I don't know. But I think the focus of this movie, since you bookended it with a whole thing about the parents, I think it should have been about that. I think it should have been about Superman thinking about his parents a little bit, his biological parents, and there should have been some dialogue about that, about who he really is, and then eventually, you know, at the end, it's no, he's really a country bumpkin, just like his folks. And I would have appreciated if you didn't treat every Midwesterner as a country bumpkin. I mean, even me, a guy from South Jersey, like, you know, I've had that attitude in my life. I don't have that anymore, but back in the day, I get it. I understand where it comes from, but Jesus, man, it's a little too obvious. Like, yeah, just, you know, I get it. They're from the Midwest. They're supposed to be from Kansas. Just make them from Kansas. Just make them farmers. That's it. You know, put them in the farmer outfit and have them milk the cows or whatever. But, you know, go easy on it. And then the weird thing is, in flashback, with Ma and Pa Kent raising little Clark, like, it looked that Pa Kent had like the worst costume wig on, just like the absolute worst in the flashback. And I watched it and I was like, Jesus, like, spend a little money, James Gunn, spend a little money. So I'm not sure, you know, that's really the heart of this movie, is the whole thing about the parents. There's a bunch of stuff in the middle that just a big distraction, quite frankly. So anyhow, so that's a big controversy. So Lex Luthor somehow translates that, somehow still doesn't know he's Clark Kent, which is kind of funny. I enjoyed that. And then he tells the world, oh, this is the translation. And somehow everybody in the world knows that's the real translation, and they believe it. That Superman was sent to rule over all of us, and that's why. And then suddenly everybody turns on him. But even that sort of goes away, because there's so much going on in the movie that kind of makes an impact. But then we're on to other stuff. Eventually, Superman surrenders himself to the government, but the Lex Luthor has convinced the government that Planet Watch, a team of his guys, are the only ones that can handle Superman. And that includes Ultraman, the Engineer, and a bunch of guys who I guess are like an Iron Man type suits. I guess they're real guys who are gonna do that. And again, it's a little much, because when you add that on top of all the other crap going on in this movie, it starts to be like, okay, I guess we're doing this too. And so, of course, he ends up surrendering, goes right to Lex Luthor, who takes him to a pocket dimension where he traps him. Well, first, Superman goes willingly, and then he introduces him to Metamorpho, who can make kryptonite, because there's no kryptonite left in the world. So that introduces Metamorpho. And then they keep him weak, and they torture him, and they do all sorts of things. But they have Metamorpho because they're holding his son hostage. And then eventually, and then Superman says, oh, I'll save your son, you know, stop trying to kill me. And at first he says no, but then later in the movie he changes his mind. Because Lex Luthor kills this dude who's in the scene, who was nice to Superman. So Lex Luthor kidnaps him and tortures him, and then says, tell me what I want to know, or else I'll kill this dude. And he starts playing Russian roulette, and then he just kills him. But that's where the movie is very weak in Lex Luthor's plan, because he just wants to kill him, and the government wants some information, but it's not really clear, like, what information Superman could give him. Like, what information could he give him? he doesn't really have any. The whole instance was ginned up by Lex Luthor just so he could kill him eventually. So he's torturing him for nothing, essentially. So, anyhow, there's a lot of scenes where Lex Luthor has to leave for some reason. Uh, Again, not super strong in this part of the movie. But then Lois takes charge, goes to the Justice Gang, which is Guy Gardner, Hawkgirl, and Mr. Terrific, and says, "You got to save your friend, Superman." And you've seen part of that scene. And she eventually gets Mr. Terrific involved, and he beats everybody up at the army base and somehow doesn't get into trouble. They break into the pocket dimension, and basically there's this long fight scene where Superman has to escape the pocket dimension along with Metamorpho and Crypto, who's also being tortured. Um, and Joey, who's Metamorpho's son. So there's this long sequence. That sequence was kind of fun, but again, very convoluted. I kind of like that, the Crypto thing, and it just, the whole thing about Lex Luthor keeping him, and he kept leaving. He didn't seem to have a very important reason to leave. Like, what needed to happen is Lex had to leave. He was there to kill him, but he had to leave because, I don't know, things in Bavaria are falling apart, and Lex is the only guy to fix it. But anyhow, that's what they went. And so he escapes, and then Lex has a meltdown, and then the whole movie turns I think at that point. In order to save Bavaria, he sends the Justice Gang, and then Superman's fighting Ultraman, and then he finds out he's a clone, and then Lex is fighting him, or Lex is directing Ultraman to beat him, and eventually Superman calls in Crypto, who saves the day by destroying all the little devices that help direct Ultraman. Oh, and he also beats the engineer in another scene. And Crypto's great. I like Crypto in the movie. I think I could have watched a movie just with Superman and Crypto saving the world. I really could have. I think they needed to take out, again, about 6 characters. I would have stripped it down to Lois, Perry, and Jimmy, Superman, just Lex. Lex and Otis was enough for Richard Donner. But if you aren't going to do a whole Otis sidekick, Miss Tessmacher was fun. I did enjoy Miss Tessmacher. And Jimmy Olsen's new thing, where he's like a cool dude who gets the ladies. But, it's still not great. So anyhow, how to frig does this end? He beats Ultraman. He beats everybody. Oh, and here's the thing: in order to save Superman, they have to go to the Pocket Universe, which then Lex Luthor somehow turns up the imaginary sci-fi juice, so it creates a rift in the space-time continuum, which then Mr. Terrific has to close, but he can't do it on his own. Somehow he needs Superman, and then they eventually just close it. At some point, the fight just drags on so long. Ultraman falls into it, and then later it just closes. I forget how he closes it. He beats Ultraman. Oh, and then he fights his way into Luthor Corps and beats up Lex Luthor, and then Mr. Terrific finally shuts it off. So it didn't feel like it was not going to work out, right? It felt very much like, okay, we've had enough fun. Let's wrap this up. And that's the problem with the movie. There's really no surprise. It's kind of boring when you get right down to it. The parts of it are fun, but parts of it are just kind of boring because you know what's going to happen. So, yeah. I mean, Superman, I did like Superman saving people. He's always saving people. That's what Superman should do. He gets beat up a lot. That was one negative complaint I heard from my girlfriend. Said, I didn't like that Superman got beat up so much. Yeah, I didn't like that either. I thought that was a little much. A lot of people complained about that too. But he does have a great sort of monologue with Lex at the end of the movie that's not about fighting or anything. It's just about, hey, you know, we're all human. We make mistakes, and I hope you realize that one day. Like, he's nice, tries to be nice to Lex Luthor, and Lex Luthor is not happy about it. And then everybody goes to prison, and it's all good. It's all good. So it didn't feel like an epic battle. It just felt like another 2 weeks in the world of Superman. Next week, Lex Luthor will be out, and he'll be doing it all again. So I guess what they needed to do is make it feel like it was a little more epic, right? That there was a little more on the line here. That not so much as secret identity. I like that they didn't bother to do that again. But that, Lex is trying to kill him, but that Lex had some real skin in the game. And they kind of undermine that with some of his dialogue, just being like, I just hate Superman so much, that's why I'm doing all this. It should have been like, that those plans were important to him for some reason. Trying to remember what Gene Hackman said about his Luthor, but I don't know if I'm conflating it with the comic book, but the idea that Luthor had nothing, and I believe he killed some of his siblings to get his fortune or something, in one version of the story anyway. But I would have liked to have seen Nicholas Hoult be given something a little more weighty, why he hated Superman, that, he had to work for whatever he got in this world, and Superman was just immediately embraced. And it sort of gets at that with this monologue with Superman at the end. Like, it almost gets to the point where, like, hey, Lex, maybe if you weren't such an a-hole, people would like it. Yeah. And Lex does kill this guy, and I understand why Doomcock was upset by that, but Lex kills people. I think he probably should have had... there was the leader of Bavaria was in that scene too. I think they probably should have had him do it. He should have been the one doing the gun thing. And then when he's playing Russian roulette and shoots him on the second bullet, then that way Lex's reaction would have been more like, well, I didn't kill him. And I really thought that game would go on a lot longer. But, it's fine. But I didn't care much for the characters, quite frankly. Lois Lane is a little too bossy, a little too together, does way too much, doesn't do the damsel in distress. I mean, they were already undoing that with Richard Donner's film, hate to tell you. Lois was kind of a feminist version of Lois, but I would have liked to have seen at least one scene where Lois gets saved by Superman, rather than being like the super girlfriend, which is what she kind of is portrayed in this movie. I would have liked to have seen her in danger at least once and then rescued, or maybe Superman rescues some, Cat Grant or someone like that, and then Lois is a little jealous. Something a little more female. From the female characters. The engineer, you didn't really need to see that because she's just a villain. She was just another villain. It's fine. She gave up her humanity for these superpowers or whatever. But for Lois and Kat and some of the other female characters, Miss Tessmacher is actually the most feminine character in the movie. Because she's actually, but even she is portrayed as actually being smart. Because you have this scene where it's revealed that she was taking all these selfies, but she was taking them in front of important LexCorp things, Luthor Corp things. I really wanted to see a scene where she was like, confronts Jimmy and says, "Oh, did you get my selfies?" And he says something like, "Yeah, and all the amazing information on it. Thank you so much for sending it. It really brought down Lex." And her to go, "Oh, it did?" Because I think that would have been true to her character. So, when you add it up, Lois is a strong, independent woman who reluctantly enters in a relationship with Superman. Miss Tessmacher, arguably the biggest idiot in henchman history. Turns out, nope, she's super smart too. Hawk Girl is just sort of there. They don't really get into whether she's smart but she does do her thing. She gets one scene. So James Gunn has pushed all the woke stuff into the subtext. Or maybe he didn't. I mean, might have just been choices, or it might have been the studio forcing him to do stuff, and then that's where he added it. I don't know. But overall, very watchable movie. Crypto adds a lot. And then finally you got the ending with Supergirl showing up and calling Superman a bitch. I didn't like that. Felt it was a little too much, and they're setting up her character, I guess, to be some sort of party girl who's also a superhero. Really doesn't make any sense, but okay. You want to go down that path, I guess that could be fun. A young girl with superpowers who likes to get drunk, but she has to go to a planet with a red sun to get drunk. Not sure how she gets off that planet after she goes out and gets drunk. I'm not sure how that's going to work. Kind of not really making any sense to me, but okay. Again, I would trust in James Gunn. I mean, he's got a lot to do with the Supergirl movie, too. It'll probably be pretty watchable. I'll say. It'll probably be more watchable than the original Supergirl movie, I'll tell you that. Or even the damn comics, which haven't been really all that readable, in my opinion. And look, he's got fun stuff going on. Guy Gardner was fun. They get funny lines. They get little quirky things to do. He just, in my view, should have pared it back. That's my main criticism. Just too many characters, too much stuff going on. You turn your head away from the screen and look back, you'll miss 3 things in this movie. No lie. So I can understand a lot of the criticism, but the guys who are like, "Hey, let's boycott this movie, let's hate it, let's call it woke," I think it's a bit of a stretch. I mean, it's definitely, I'll say, tainted by woke, but I wouldn't call it like woke. It's, again, they pushed it into the background as much as they could, which is an improvement, honestly. It's kind of what they were been doing in the 90s. If you want a based movie, you got to find another Hollywood. I mean, I don't know what you think's going to come out of Hollywood anytime soon, but I can tell you this: in a big studio picture like this for an IP like Superman, it ain't going to be super based. I mean, it should be. It should be. I would love to see a super based Superman with, who's, a real country boy, let's say, and he doesn't take guff, and he's okay with guns. He's a good guy, but he's okay with guns. Like, yeah, we always had guns on the farm. But they're not going to do that movie. And look, that would be out of character for Superman. That's not the way he was designed. He was designed at a time when, that stuff wasn't even an issue. He doesn't need a gun. And it wasn't really an issue that anybody other than criminals were misusing guns. So, different time. So to throw Superman in the midst of any political stuff, I mean, they try to do it with this whole Bavaria thing. It doesn't really resonate much, other than it's kind of Luther's thing, and Superman and the Justice Gang save this country that who cares? Like, I don't even care about this country. I think I get it. You know, it was a really convoluted Lex Luthor plan to make a lot of money, but I don't know if you needed it. I mean, maybe something simpler. You know, I don't know, like a stock scheme or something. Something with the pharmaceutical companies, maybe. But yeah, I mean, for a mindless summer movie, this is totally fine. Again, I wouldn't call it like great art or anything. Um, you know, if you turn this into comic books, I wouldn't call them great comics. I would just say, oh, they're okay. They're like standard Superman comic. I wouldn't want anything under this. Like a movie that was lesser than this, get the hell out of here with that. But there's so much in here. It's jam packed. You know, basically, and it just moves so fast. You can't help but be entertained a little. Really, the slowest scene in that movie is the interview with Lois. And of course, the other scene with Lois, the really dopey scene, is the scene they showed the initial still from. Where, remember when Cornswet is sitting in sitting like on a chair, and then in the background is this giant jellyfish thing out in the skyline that's shooting a beam, and he doesn't seem overly concerned about it. That scene's bad. I would have cut that scene. Nobody reacts normally. Lois certainly does it. She comes into the room, and instead of immediately going, "What the hell is that thing out in the distance?" and addressing it, like they go a few lines before, like, "Oh, you know, shouldn't you be out there?" And then it's like, "Oh no, it's this fifth dimensional creature," which I think is an allusion to Mr. Mxyzptlk, which you'll never see because he's definitely not going to resonate. But so in that respect, it was a very strange movie, and that's a bad scene. You know, towards the end of the movie, he just starts beating everybody. People said, "Oh, he doesn't really get a scene where he beats everybody." He definitely beats all those Iron Man dudes. He like beats the hell out of all of them. I mean, like dozens and dozens and dozens of them he beats up, and they all start dropping from the sky. So he beats Ultraman, you know, and he gets the credit, and then he beats up Lex Luthor. So I honestly don't understand the strong reactions. I understand the reactions. I don't understand why it's so divisive for you. It's just a stupid superhero movie. You know, it's about as look. If you wanted to skip the origin, this is it. You know, a lot of people said skip the origin, which I'm fine with because I'm sick of seeing the origin. But the origin is what gives Superman some gravitas in the old movies, right? But that is sort of pushed aside until it kind of comes out in the movie, but it's not the focus of the movie. So if you wanted the gravitas of the Richard Donner movies, you can't be mad that they sort of glossed over his origin and just got right into the meat of the thing. We're basically, this would be like the second or third Superman movie. This is basically a good version of, you know, you start introducing the other characters. It does feel, though, a little bit like Hollywood is only introducing Superman so they can introduce you to the real characters, which is just about everybody else in the film, including Lois Lane. Who, again, just, you know, and she is a super hot smoke show, by the way, the woman who plays Lois Lane, but she is dressed in the frumpiest clothes you could possibly imagine, and we see very little of her. Miss Tessmacher gets a little feminine. Cat Grant wears something cleavagey. I don't even know why she's in the movie, though, other than to show her boobs. They did drop in the sports guy character, which was kind of funny, but then they undermined him with some bit at the end where he's worried about his cat, and then he becomes a total coward. You know, he's the guy who picks on Clark Kent, but then secretly he's a coward. Again, like, there's just so much going on in this damn movie. So if you want to see the movie, see it. Don't look away from the damn screen. If you have to go to the bathroom, I'm telling you, you walk out of that theater to go take a pee, unless it's during the Lois interview, which is, again, the most boring and long part of the movie, you're going to miss like 9 scenes and be totally lost. So, and for the rest of the internet complaining about this thing, calm the F down. It's fine, but I think you had your expectations set a little too high. And I think I blame a lot of that on James Gunn for endlessly talking about this film. Too much, dude. Too much. And the marketing on this film has been god awful. I don't like the... now that I've seen the movie, those trailers are garbage. They're utter garbage. You know, all the stuff you cut in those scenes, like, I don't know what you're doing. You know, the best thing in this movie is crypto. I would have emphasized that, you know, crypto a little more. But, you know, the initial reaction to that was very poor because of he was bleeding and people didn't like that. Maybe you did need a scene where Superman actually, you know, punches a dude and he goes down and, you know, he just wins. I did love that Superman was fretting about the giant monster and how not to kill him. That felt like a real Superman moment. He didn't want to kill the monster, even though the thing was gigantic and was smashing the city. That felt like Superman. He was trying to be the Boy Scout continually. And that was a good thing. And he failed at it sometimes, and that was fine. But yeah, you're right. He did get beat up quite a bit. I would have liked to have seen at least one scene where Superman doesn't get beat up. Or just, you know, and really we only see it with he fights the Iron Man at the end real quick. It's real quick. I would have liked to have seen him at some point. And he basically beats the hell out of Ultraman at the end of the movie. But then Ultraman almost comes back and beats him and gets him sucked into the black hole or whatever the hell. I don't even know what the thing is at the end of the movie. It's a rift or something. I don't know. Too much going on. Too much going on. So if you like a movie that you want to have blasted into your synapses with like 15 characters and half of them you'll forget, go see Superman. It's not an important movie, but it's a movie. And that's it for me, Tony D, and Little Joan. Check us out on the black site, the orange site, and the green site for all our other videos. It's getting late. I got to wrap this up. We'll see you tomorrow.